In this problem, you are given a 20 kg block and it lies on a surface. The coefficient of static friction is 0.5, the coefficient of kinetic friction is 0.35, and you're pushing it with a force of 80 newtons. So the first question is, will the object slide? And then the second question is, if it does slide, what is the acceleration? So let's take a look at this problem. It's a simple problem. There are lots of little parts here that you need to be very careful about. So the first thing is, in order to answer whether the object will slide or no, we need to figure out what the maximum force of static friction is. Okay, so the condition is very simple. If the maximum force of static friction is less than 80 newtons, which means that the pushing force is greater than this Fs max, then the object will slide. Okay, and if Fs max is less, so if Fs max is greater than 80 newtons, which means that the pushing force is less than the Fs max, then it will not slide. So in order to answer the first question, we first must figure out what is Fs max. So let's go ahead and do this. Now, if you've understood already, you know that in order to know Fs max, you need to know the force of contact, and for which you need to know we need to find the force of contact. So we have 196 newtons pulling it down. We draw a free body diagram and we have Fn, and since the object is not accelerating along the vertical direction, we know that Fn is equal to 196 newtons. Now, since Fn is 196 newtons, what we know is we can calculate Fs max using the formula Fs max equals mu s times Fn, and mu s is equal to 0.4, Fn is equal to 196, and you multiply 0.4 by 196, you get 78.4 newtons. Now we look at our condition. The pushing force is 80 newtons, okay, and Fs max is 78.4. So therefore, since 80 newtons is greater than Fs max, okay, the object will move. And now that the object is moving, we need to ask, what is the acceleration? Okay, now in order to answer that question, we need to really be careful here, and we need to figure out one thing. Once the object is sliding, we have to ask what force of friction comes into play. And the answer is that it will be the force of kinetic friction. So you have Fk pushing it to the right, to the left. You have 80 newtons pushing it to the right, and the result is going to be 20 times A. Now, using this free body diagram, we can calculate the acceleration. But before that, we need to figure out the force of kinetic friction, which happens to be equal to mu k times Fn, and mu k was 0.35 multiplied by 196. You end up getting 68.6 newtons. Alright, we're now ready to calculate the value. So if we get 80 minus 68.6 equals 20A, and 80 minus 68.6 is equal to 11.4, which is 20 times A. And so if I divide both sides by 20, I get 11.4 over 20, which happens to be 0.57 meters per second square. So remember, in this problem, first we had to figure out whether the object was sliding or not, for which we had to figure out Fs max. Since the pushing force was greater than the Fs max, the object we realized was going to slide. Now once we know it's going to slide, we need to make sure that we account for the correct force of friction, which in this case happens to be the force of kinetic friction. We calculate it, we plug it into our equation, and we obtain the acceleration. Okay, make sure you understand this problem, because a lot of the things in future are going to be based on ideas like this.